My name is Thomas Eriksson, and I'm a journalist based in Bergen, Norway. For the past 23 years, I've covered everything from local politics to international crime. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has consumed me like the case I'm about to tell you about. It started 3 months ago, when I was researching a completely different story. I was digging through old police archives, looking for information about Cold War activity in Norway, when I stumbled across a file that made my blood run cold. The label read, Isdal Woman, Case 29, 1970, Unresolved. I thought I knew this case. Everyone in Bergen knows about the Isdal Woman, a woman's charred body found in the remote Isdal Valley in November 1970. No identification, no leads. Case closed, filed away as another mystery that would never be solved. But as I opened that file, I realized I knew nothing at all. Let me take you back to November 29, 1970. It was a bitter morning in Bergen, the kind of morning where the wind cuts through your coat and settles in your bones. A father and his young daughter were hiking in Isdalen, Death Valley as locals call it, when they discovered something that would haunt them forever. The body was found in a remote, rocky area about 500 meters from the hiking trail. She had been burned beyond recognition. Her clothes were gone, reduced to ash. The fire had been so intense that it had melted the rocks around her. But here's what the newspapers didn't report. What I found buried in page 47 of the police file. The fire hadn't spread, not even a little. In a valley known for its dry vegetation, the fire had burned in a perfect circle around the body and then stopped. That's not how fires work. That's not how anything works. The woman was estimated to be between 25 and 40 years old. Brown hair, about 164 centimeters tall. But what struck me most when I saw the crime scene photos was her hands. They were positioned in a way that suggested she was alive when the fire started. The police noted defensive wounds, but they buried this detail in the technical reports. I've covered dozens of murders, but I've never seen anything like this. The precision was like surgical, clinical, as if someone had turned killing into an art form. 2 days after the body was found, police discovered 39 sleeping pills in her stomach. The bottles were found nearby, along with a partially melted suitcase. Inside that suitcase was something that changed everything. 9 different passports, all with the same woman's photograph, but different names and nationalities. Vera Jarle from Belgium, Alexia Zarna Merchez from Switzerland, Claudia Chelt from Germany. Each passport told a different story, but they all led to the same conclusion. This woman had been living multiple lives. But here's what kept me up at night. The passports weren't forgeries. They were real, issued by real governments. Someone with serious resources had created an entire network of identities for this woman. The question was why? I spent weeks tracing the woman's movements before her death. The investigation led me to hotels across Bergen where she had stayed under different names. The hotel staff remembered her, not because she was memorable, but because she was the opposite. She was a ghost. She spoke softly, always paid in cash, and left no impression on anyone she met. But at the Hotel Marin, I found something the police had missed. The receptionist from 1970 was still alive, 89 years old and sharp as a razor. Her name was Astrid Holmsen, and when I mentioned the Isdal Woman, her face went pale. I remember her, she told me, her voice barely above a whisper. She came in 3 times that month. Different names each time, but the same eyes. Cold eyes. And she always asked for the same thing. What was that? A room facing the harbor. She would stand at the window for hours, watching the ships, like she was waiting for something or someone. The coded diary was found in her hotel room. 26 pages of symbols and numbers that looked like a child's scribbles. The police handed it over to cryptographers, but they couldn't crack it. For 50 years, it remained a mystery. Last month, I took the diary to Professor Henrik Larsson at the University of Bergen. He specializes in Cold War codes, and what he told me made my hands shake. This is not a standard code, he said, pointing to the symbols. This is a personal cipher, probably created by someone with intelligence training. Look at the pattern here. He traced his finger across the page. These numbers correspond to maritime schedules, ship departures, arrivals. And these symbols, they're not random. They're locations, coordinates. We spent 3 hours decoding just the first page, and what we found was a detailed log of ship movements in and out of Bergen harbor. But not just any ships, Soviet vessels, cargo ships that had no business being in Norwegian waters. The Cold War was at its peak in 1970. Norway was a NATO member, but its long border with the Soviet Union made it a hotbed of espionage. The theory that the Isdal Woman was a spy wasn't new, but now I had proof. I contacted retired intelligence officers who had worked in Bergen during the 1970s. Most refused to talk, but one agreed to meet me on condition of anonymity. He was 78 years old, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. "We knew about her," he said simply. "We'd been watching her for months. She was good, better than most of our own people. But she was playing a dangerous game, double, maybe triple agent. In the end, someone decided she knew too much." "Who killed her?" He looked out at the harbor, where the lights of cargo ships flickered in the darkness. "Take your pick. The Russians, the Americans, maybe even our own people. In those days, loyalty was a luxury none of us could afford."
I decided to visit Isdal myself. It's a 20-minute drive from Bergen, but it feels like entering another world. The valley is surrounded by steep mountains that block out most of the sunlight. Even in summer, there's something deeply unsettling about the place. The locals call it Death Valley for good reason. It's where Bergen's residents have been committing suicide for generations. But this wasn't suicide. As I stood at the exact spot where the body was found, I could feel it in my bones. The location was chosen deliberately, remote enough that the body wouldn't be found for days, but accessible enough for someone to get in and out quickly. I noticed something else, something that had been bothering me since I first saw the crime scene photos. The rocks around the burn site weren't just melted from the fire. They were arranged in a pattern, a perfect circle with the body at the center. This wasn't just murder, it was a ritual. My investigation led me to the pathologist who had performed the original autopsy. Dr. Bjorn Stensrud was 92 years old and living in a nursing home outside Bergen. His memory was foggy, but when I mentioned the Isdal Woman, his eyes became sharp and focused. "I've performed over 3,000 autopsies in my career," he said, "but that one was different. The burns were post-mortem, but the positioning of the body suggested she had been conscious when the fire started. And there was something else, something I never put in the official report." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She had a tattoo, small, on her left shoulder blade. It had been partially burned away, but I could still make out the shape. It was a crown, a very specific crown. I'd seen it before during the war. It was the symbol of a Soviet intelligence unit that officially didn't exist." The deeper I dug, the more dangerous the story became. I started receiving phone calls at odd hours. No one on the other end, just silence. My apartment was broken into, but nothing was taken, just searched thoroughly. I began to realize that this case wasn't just unsolved, it was actively being suppressed. Someone, somewhere, was still very interested in keeping the truth about the Isdal Woman buried. Last week, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, the Isdal Woman alive, standing on a dock in Bergen. She was looking directly at the camera, and for the first time, I could see her eyes. They were the eyes of someone who knew she was going to die. On the back of the photograph was a single line, written in the same code as the diary. "Some secrets are worth dying for." I had it translated. The message was clear: stop looking. But I can't stop. Not now. Not when I'm so close to the truth. The official cause of death was listed as suicide, but the evidence tells a different story. The sleeping pills, the multiple passports, the coded diary, the ritual arrangement of the body. This was an execution, professional, methodical, and designed to send a message. But a message to whom? I've been working on this story for 3 months now, and I'm no closer to identifying the Isdal Woman than I was when I started. But I've learned something more important. Some cases aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be warnings. The Cold War may be over, but its shadows still stretch across the landscape of Bergen. In the files I've seen, the meetings I've had, the threats I've received, I've realized the Isdal Woman's story is still being written, and those who killed her are still out there, still watching, still waiting. 3 days ago, I made a decision. I'm releasing this story, despite the risks. The Isdal Woman deserves to have her story told, even if we never know her real name. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, maybe someone's mother. She lived, she loved, and she died in the most brutal way imaginable. But more than that, she was a guardian of secrets, secrets that someone killed to protect. And in the end, maybe that's the most important truth of all. The file remains open. Case 29-1970. Unresolved. But I won't stop digging, even if it kills me. Because in the end, some stories are worth dying for. If you're listening to this, it means I'm still alive, for now. But if something happens to me, remember this. The truth about the Isdal Woman isn't buried in Death Valley. It's hiding in plain sight, in the corridors of power, in the shadows of the Cold War that never really ended. Her name was, well, I suppose that's the point. We'll never know her real name. But she was real, she mattered, and she deserves justice, even if justice comes 50 years too late. This is Thomas Eriksson, reporting from Bergen, Norway. Thank you for listening.